Welcome, Adventure. I'm GM Goblin, your GM Goblin. And today, I'm going to take a quick look at what makes a good boss fight, as well as just like epic fights in general. I was reminded of this recently because I had a player tell me about several fights from our last campaign and last couple series or adventures that I've ran. And all the way back to something like Sandpoint. And I think it's one of the things that is not only easy for us to put into all of our games, but is something that I think we can understand why the players like it. So if you like any of my content, you want to see some more, I'm sure I've written about some of this stuff before. You can make videos about it. Go ahead and give me a like, subscribe, and then we're going to look at one of these. So as a player said, Sandpoint, this was one of the fights that you have. Part 1, this is Stones over Sandpoint. If you're in this campaign, you might want to turn back now, or at least skip ahead a few minutes. But basically through this fight, you've got this large area, everything's set up, and you're looking at a total of hit plans for 24 rounds. And so round 25 is retreat. And I think it's part of the reason why players like these, because it's not just a straightforward fight. In this fight, you're giving them an objective besides just beat the bad guy. Most fights, you go in, walk in room, everyone sees each other, you roll initiative, whoever wins, wins, you go, and then 3 rounds later, it's done. Most fights in actual time don't last that long, whether it takes you hours, and I've seen hours for turns. It's just something that 3 turns is usually pretty normal. This exact same group that I went through with this, 1 round at a Trask. They were like level 17, maybe 18, and they 1 round at a Trask. And so it's just players are going to plan for the most amount of damage to be put out. They're going to do it to be more effective. And so it's just something that makes this kind of fight interesting, because every few rounds, something new happens. Gates get breached in different areas. Players have to run around, fly, try and save town folk. You've got a dragon that comes in. You've got maneuverability. We had one player that held one, I think it was down here, the beer or death bridge, and I think she held it all by herself. And so it makes for memorable moments, and it's not just everyone rolls to see how high of damage they can get, which my party does that. That's kind of their thing. They want to see, and they keep a running tally of who's got the highest damage. But after this fight, I kind of started moving some of my fights to mimic this. One of them, same campaign, was the extension that I did to level 20. I had them fighting Baba Yaga. Baba Yaga, I had used not just a hard monster, which was a Relu from another campaign, Wrath of the Righteous. CR 27, they were all level 20. And so it was a hard fight to begin with because I had this. I had a familiar. And then I also had a Hecaton Titan CR 24 that they had to fight as well. And so with this, they had multiple opponents and I phased them. So things came in and out. So phasing them from one to another, having crowd control with the giant because he could hit the entire area, limiting the space because giving your players too much space or your monsters too little is detriment, and they're going to lose. And we plan for our monsters to lose, but planning for your party is good too. She had a familiar. This familiar ran around with an iron flask and a rod of innervation, and I think I had a couple rods of absorption. You need to know what that means. We had spell immunity for the Titan. I actually think I had spell immunity on all 3 of them. Let's see here. Let's get rid of that. I had a rod of absorption, so targeted spells were being absorbed, so they had to do something besides just hope and pray that there was a save that was missed. Iron Flask, was something that I did with the familiar because it allowed me to get rid of summoned monsters. And then I gave the familiar, who was also under greater invisibility, innervation. Innervation because now there was something else that they had to use a resource, unless you were the wizard, who already had, see invisibility permanently on them. Then you had a character using innervation where they either had to have something that protected them from necromancy or kept them from negative levels, but it allowed me to hit them with something that was a debuff. And it extended this fight multiple rounds. Also, whenever the main character dropped in her HP, she went to a crystal ball. From the crystal ball, her contingency, she got heal put on her after she was teleported down. Players didn't know where she was because they didn't have time to investigate the room yet. She could see and cast from inside of it. And so it allowed another mechanic where the players had to find her, defend or defeat opponents, and then figure out how to deal with her. And putting in these multi-step fights, these things that you have to deal with, just makes things more interesting. One of the other fights that they had was using this map, I believe, right here. And it was, who did this one? Runkle's Mansion Heist map. But I had used a map. It was either this or something very like this. And characters were inside. They attempt to get assassinated. And then suddenly there is a ship outside. And there is attacks on other NPCs. There is a ship that goes down over here in the corner. And so things play off to where one thing happens, characters run outside. I had characters inside that had a different stage that happened, I think, on round 2. And then things popped off around the map in stages. So it ended up sometimes splitting the party, allowed them to come back together. They fought a dragon. They took out one of the head generals that had come, and it allowed them to move about. And the monsters, I made sure, had similar types of movement most of the time so that they weren't put at a huge disadvantage. But it was something that just allowed them to play in different areas. It extended the fight and made them have to do something other than just trading hits. And so if you're ever in a fight or you're ever making up fights for your players, I recommend trying to be creative. Another map that I did this on is when they were going through a underground area and the boss's lair. I had not only a boss and an elemental involved, but I sealed off all the doors whenever they came in. And then I used a mix of rock falling mechanics and I think cold to require them to think and to move. They couldn't stand in one spot because I had lines that came through the room where they had to dodge or they took damage. I had areas, so if you stayed just on the floor and you moved in certain areas, you were going to be damaged. It's just something that, remember, it's not just the monster that you pick, but also how you present it. And it doesn't matter if it is exactly in the books. So I do one of these things where I say that a good thing to do is going to be if it's fun and enjoyable by your players. And I mix in things even from like anime. So I have sometimes these ridiculous abilities or things happen, lair actions like in 5e. I've mentioned this before, I think. Lair actions are a great thing. Add them into your 3.5 or your Pathfinder game. Lair actions was one of the things that I think was really good that came out of 5e. 4th edition, you had minions, so it was reasonably dangerous opponents that had like 1 HP. Do that. Do 1 hit die or 1 HP so that your players can kill a lot of them. They know they can't ignore them because they can kill them. Now, I did this for my last campaign all the way up to my guys were in my 20s. I mean, they had stuff that was like 8 HP and they could hit them. They could deal damage, so they couldn't ignore them. but it allowed that wizard to whip out, you know, fireball, magic tricks or something. It allowed one of the characters to transform into a dragon and then use a breath weapon. Using these different mechanics that allow you to make your fights interesting and make them multi-stage. Don't present everything the first round of combat. I found that extending the fights, even just a few rounds, will make your players enjoy it more because it breaks up the monotony and it'll make it interesting. So they'll get to have a little bit of fun. They'll see weird mechanics. And if it's not in the books, that's fine. As long as you're not doing something that's overly ridiculous, then it's okay. Lair actions, bring it on. Lair immunities, weird things that change throughout combat. Maybe they freeze in ice for some reason. Put something in the story for it. Put something in there and then play to your party's strengths and weaknesses. It's going to make things a lot more enjoyable. It's going to make sure that they remember those fights like my players did with the raid at Sandpoint. Like my players did when I did the big mansion, or a couple big mansion fights like this. Like it did when they fought the big bad of a 20 level campaign. And so do this to break up the normal fights and put in normal fights. I guess you don't want to make everything something long, something like Sandpoint, you know, do this and you level again. But every once in a while, it's good to put in there. It makes great boss fights. It makes great fights in general. And it will help your players not just remember the cool things that they do, but the cool situations that you put them into. All right. That's my advice for today. Have some fun, roll some dice, and enjoy your week. All right.